This happens a lot when new couples have a baby. The fathers can sometimes feel like, wow, I don't feel so bonded to this child, but that happens later. And that's because he's not releasing as much oxytocin, and that's not his bonding hormone. The bonding hormone for the masculine body, the testosterone-filled body, is vasopressin, which is the stress hormone, the struggle hormone. That's why later on, when a kid gets a little bit older, he starts fumbling around, he's becoming a toddler, dad can finally play with him and teach and do projects and impart his wisdom and struggle together and watch him fall over. This bonds dad to the kid because they're going through these struggles and this stress. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack here. And today I want to get into differentiating the attraction versus bonding mechanisms between men and women. I'm super fascinated by this, and there's so many things that no one ever taught me when I was in my teens and 20s, and it's just become like a big aha upon learning some of these things. And before I get into it, I just want to say just thank you. Super grateful, huge gratitude to all the people that have been listening, all the new folks that started listening and watching over the last week or so. I've been reading the comments from some of the new subscribers, and y'all are just so engaging and thoughtful and nuanced and really smart. And that's all I hope for, to gather people together for Ancient Intelligence. So super grateful and thank you. Onward, let's get into it. So I love this topic. I could talk about it for hours, but I want to get into a bit of a high level around the attraction and bonding differences. And so I'm going to start with kind of like a little story, a little fable that really just underpins this foundational pull between the masculine and the feminine. And just to say, I started all of this when I read The Way of the Superior Man many, many years ago. That was kind of the beginning for me. And then for this specific video, I did some research from Andrew Huberman and also evolutionary psychologist David Buss, always with the foundational frameworks of Alison Armstrong, who is like the original amazing woman who helps men and women so much in her work. And so, yeah, I just love expanding on it and adding to it and adding my own flavor and modernity and also cultural relevance too. If y'all don't know, I'm from Baku, Azerbaijan originally. So there's a former Soviet element that comes up in some of the ways that I think about things. So thinking about things from an American lens versus a European lens. And so let's do it. So a man is getting ready to go on a trip. Imagine this man, he's works hard, he's getting ready to go on a trip, and he thinks to himself, I have everything I need. What am I missing? And the answer in his heart is her. So he finds a woman in his heart and tells her he's going on an exciting trip. He asks her if she'd like to come with him. She says to him, well, why don't you go by yourself? You obviously could go by yourself. And he thinks and he thinks and he replies, I could go alone, but having you by my side will make it so much more fun. She thinks for a while and realizes without him, she could never go on a trip like this while being completely taken care of, right? So feeling at ease, she agrees, and instantly for him, his black and white, kind of more drab world is filled with color. And this little tale, if you will, it just paints the picture of the foundational pull between the masculine and feminine poles, right? So like the basis of this attraction that we have for each other really lies in the following questions and answers to these questions, right? So when you ask a woman what she's looking for in a man, I've said this many times before, I always come back to it. She always usually says, I want him to have my back to make me feel safe, right? And there's so many levels of safety. I talked about that in my vulnerability video, but I'll come back to it over and over again. But specifically here, let's just take kind of the original framework, the physical safety, really just feeling safe in his presence. And then for men, when you're looking for, what are you looking for in a woman? They say, you know, I want her to energize me, to radiate, to light up my life, right? Give my life something that I couldn't have had without her. It's such a beautiful, foundational desire. I've heard time and time again, right? So, like, women want a solid, strong man that makes them feel safe. Men want a radiant, feminine woman that is going to really just inspire him and admire him and encourage him, right? That support. And these are beautiful things. And so, what's really interesting is this desire that each of the sexes has hormones that gets released at really specific times, especially in the process of dating and relating and mating. And what I found was that men have a little bit of a different timeline when it comes to meeting a woman and falling for her, if you will. I don't even know if I like that terminology, but bonding with her than a woman does. I think women bond really differently than men do. And that's why there's so many misunderstandings that happen during that time. And it's not malicious. And for so long, I was so confused, especially in my early 20s. Oh my gosh, I was so confused about this. And then when I understood, it all became really clear to me. So basically, the opposite sex, love and science. Okay. And I've got some research here that I've written. So I'm kind of following my notes here. Attraction and bonding is really different for both men and women. When it comes to having desire, being attracted to someone, based on the estrogen that's released in the feminine in a woman, a lot of serotonin is released when it comes to feeling that attraction. So she feels that serotonin gets released. And as we know, maybe we don't, but it's the stability and safety hormone, right? So serotonin gets released. So if she feels safe, this man is a strong man and she feels safe with him, she's going to release that hormone and it's going to give her more attraction to him, right? When it comes to the masculine, though, and a testosterone driven body, dopamine is what is released during that phase of desire, right? And dopamine is related to pursuit, novelty. So automatically, we can even understand just fundamentally based on the hormones that are released during our attraction, we're so fundamentally different, right? And we can also understand that why it is that the masculine, that men are just so much more aligned to shorter term relationships, more novelty, more opportunities for sex that don't really have any bonding connected to them. And that's just natural based on the dopamine that's released and based on just the way that the masculine works and the way that his body works and the way that he's evolved to work. And so what's interesting though is when we move from desire to commitment, from attraction to bonding, for a woman, the more she begins to release oxytocin, which is the love hormone, the peace hormone, right? This is like a woman gets a flood of oxytocin when she gives birth, bonds her to this infant in a way that is undescribable for a man, right? And I know that this happens a lot when new couples have a baby. The fathers can sometimes feel like, wow, I don't feel so bonded to this child, but that happens later. And that's because he's not releasing as much oxytocin, and that's not his bonding hormone. The bonding hormone for the masculine body, the testosterone filled body, is vasopressin, which is the stress hormone, the struggle hormone. That's why later on, when a kid gets a little bit older, he starts fumbling around, he's becoming a toddler, dad can finally play with him and teach and do projects and impart his wisdom and struggle together and watch him fall over. This bonds dad to the kid because they're going through these struggles and this stress. And so when it comes to the masculine, I've heard this so many times from men. So how do you know you found the right partner? How do you know you found the right woman, right? And I've heard men say in different words, but a similar answer, which is, well, if you've been through the hard times, if she's been through the struggle with you, if you can get through the hard times together, she can make it with you, right? So men are automatically kind of relating to bonding with this stress or struggle hormone. And that's super, super interesting. So, you know, a woman needs that stability. She's attracted, she releases that. A man's attracted to a woman, he releases that dopamine because he needs that excitement and that novelty. So when it comes to commitment and bonding, we're so, so different. So next portion of this conversation really is about women having that urge to want stability so much quicker with a partner than men do. Okay. And that's because the woman and her attraction is linked to rises in estrogen and serotonin at the same time. So she's she's getting that hormone released of safety and security, because remember, that's what the feminine wants. Deep down, instinctually, evolutionarily, she wants safety and security, even if it's a faux safety and security. So what I've found, and it's so interesting, and I'm telling you guys, I have had this happen to me time and time again in my 20s, early 20s especially. Women really fall in love in direct proportion to the amount of safety and security they feel, even if it's not intentional, even if it's made up. Here's what I learned about men that's really interesting. And I have so much compassion for it now because I know it's not a malicious thing. It can be an unintentional thing. If it is malicious, then you know what? I think that's where we get into a woman feeling strong in her intuition, understanding like what's real and what's not. But a lot of times, and what I mean is this, so men will get excited about like future possibilities, and he'll be dating a woman and he'll have gone on a couple dates and been like, she's awesome, she's so great. And he'll start to get excited about different possibilities, and he'll communicate offhand ideas about the future or plans for the future, right? Things like this. This happened to me, right? Like I can automatically think of a man who I was dating for a little while, and he came into my apartment for the first time and he saw like my curtains and he said, "Oh wow, my older sister has curtains just like this. You'll have to see her place when we go over there." Right. And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh wow, he wants me to meet his older sister." Right. But that's actually not what he means. This is such a big thing to get for women. So, for example, a man will say, "Oh, wow, my sister would love you," right? He said it offhand because he believes it. He believes it to be true. His sister would love this woman, but she hears he wants me to meet his sister. She's starting to, that serotonin is starting to latch on to the future talk. Future talk, future chat has women create this like faux stability. And to the point where this hormone is continuously getting released, but there's not actual stability happening yet because we haven't gotten there yet. It's too early. It's so unintentional, but she's really just trying to satisfy that craving she has for the mix, that perfect blend of estrogen and serotonin to feel safe, right? So it causes so many problems because the woman has bonded officially. We've moved into bonding territory because she's ready to move from serotonin to oxytocin, and the man has not bonded yet. They have not gone through a single hard thing. They have not spent enough time together. He has no idea about so many aspects of who she is. Their value system has not been established. His logical brain and like really understanding if this person is good for him in the long run, none of those questions have been answered yet, right? And so, because male attraction is so closely linked to rises in dopamine, which is the novelty, the pursuit hormone, men need to experience pursuit for so much longer to build a bond. So much longer. And I've heard a lot of men that are not strong in their boundaries in who they are yet. They're excited for the possibility of having a girlfriend, or they're almost like it's either that or they're falling into a scenario in which the girl will kind of lead the relationship conversation, and she'll go ahead right after that serotonin oxytocin builds and she wants that stability. She'll start to get anxious, right? She'll start to need definitive answers about who they are, what they are, right? The relationship. And a lot of times a man will like fall into that, and then automatically right away the relationship is skewed. She is now the dominant, she is the leader, and he is the submissive, he is the follower. And no one will be happy, even though she thinks she has some sort of faux stability and joy, it's not real because the bond hasn't been built with him yet. And so if you think about it, like growing attraction to her links directly to that level of safety she feels, whereas for him, growing attraction leads to unpredictability. It's literally the opposite. It's literally the opposite. And so it's so interesting. It's like this is why films and media they depict the chase so much, right? It's usually unconscious, but this is just the it's usually unconscious, but it's just this idea that a dependable and always available woman from day one is just not what the male instinct is looking for, right? Like I'm not into this whole idea of this the chase. It's very manipulative, especially the way it's shown in media. The reality is, and what I think women should be understanding, and it's something I had to learn the very hard way, it's not about the chase. It's not about like finding ways to have a man chase you. It's more just about being intentional about not bonding yet because he hasn't yet, right? Like understanding a male's biology and psychology to the point where he hasn't bonded yet. And so I'm not going to bond yet because it's just not going to be good for anybody. We're skewing the relationship, right? We want to kind of lean in a little, lean in, lean in, lean in. We want to be harmonious in the way that we move towards each other, right? In an honorable way. And so that's why moving from attraction to commitment is just so different for the sexes. So, pair bonding. So, let's get into pair bonding. Let's actually talk about bonding and how that functions for men and women. Once we're past the page and point of attraction and we're getting into bonding and creating like a commitment, creating a relationship, so many mammals pair bond, right? We've been doing this since the beginning of time. I really truly believe it represents our more evolved and higher way of relating. I believe it's part of our spirituality. It's what replaces that animalistic urge, right? For instant gratification, without long-term satisfaction. And so there's this just big narrative in the media. It always has been this idea that like men don't want commitment, but women always do. It's just not true. I know so many men that want commitment and want long-term partnership. We all do. Both sexes do. I've just learned that men go about it in a very different way than women do. And it's actually way more logical, thoughtful, because they're invested in making one commitment. And once they make it, it's intentional and they have no idea even or thought in their mind that they're going to go back from that. Like once it's done, it's done. Sometimes to the point of insanity when things are not going well and it's very obvious that it's time for him to take himself out of that equation. I've heard so many men, like I've heard a gentleman, I just remember him saying this to me, you know, but I committed. I said I was going to be there and look how she's behaving. And I asked him, are you happy? And he said, no, but I committed. I'm committed. And so it's so mind blowing that there's a weird narrative that men are not non-committal. Men are so committal. They're just, like I said, very intentional about it. The fact that over 70% of divorces are initiated by women, this happens because women bond quickly, and this has them overlook very important elements about compatibility. Okay. This is why I feel so strongly, and this comes from the way of the superior man and that dynamic and the polarity of the relationship where the man really is in action, the leader, right? So if a man's the leader, then he's the one having the relationship conversation. He's the one leading those types of conversations. And you hear about women always doing that and men defaulting into what women say. That's when things like right away things get skewed. And so what's really interesting is because women want to satisfy that feeling of safety, which I totally understand, right? That's a whole other conversation about women doing their own work and healing their traumas and getting themselves to places where they feel firmly grounded and where they are their own center of gravity and they feel like they can find safety in other ways, right? And not just constantly seek it from a man. right? I think that's really important. What I love about men, and this is something that I've learned in so many conversations, and men really want to be sure this is right. Like they really want to be sure that this is right. And so for them, yeah, since they're the logical brain of the operation, it takes time. It takes going through struggle together. It's a much less emotional and much more pragmatic approach. It's a masculine approach. It's a beautifully masculine approach. And so, I know that the masculine is much more stimulated by building something or solving a problem. This is how he bonds, right? And this is why it's so important for women to find strength in themselves and not bond so quickly and learn that if it turns out that he's not choosing a woman, right? As a woman, he's not choosing you, and that becomes very clear. He just did you such a big favor because he has realized that in the long term, y'all aren't going to be compatible. Like, y'all aren't going to be compatible. And when you love and appreciate the logic and the forward thinking and the true desire for commitment with no turning back, when you appreciate that men really want this, they're not going to, hopefully, drag a woman along, right? For a long amount of time. I think that's really key. One of the most frustrating things as a woman is when a man is scared to have the, hey, you know what? I have loved spending time with you. It's been fantastic. I've learned so much about you, but I've realized upon all the time we've spent that we're actually not compatible. It takes a strong man full of integrity and honor to say this, to lead that conversation. Because if he's leading that with a woman that isn't compatible for him, then he can then lead the next thing with a woman that might be compatible for him, right? And so all that to say, it's a really powerful opportunity for women to understand the difference in pursuit and desire versus bonding. All right, so I think the last thing I want to share for this video is just a little bit of how to apply this to my life, right? Single folk, especially, this is especially for men. One way to support the more harmonious connecting of men and women, right? As what the point of this whole thing is just try to refrain from that future talk too early. Be more direct about where you're at. Don't avoid conversations. Lead conversations, right? If you can sense that there's something not being said, lead that. Hey, I sense that there's something that's not being said here. I'll go first. Very powerful stuff. And for women, I think I'm sorry, this is old school, but like not don't have sex with men in the beginning of dating them, especially just right at the beginning in those initial early pursuit dopamine phases, because now that you're looking for stability and your serotonin is releasing the more and more you spend time with someone that you like. You're looking for stability. You want stability, even faux stability. One of the worst things is to do something that will cause you to bond instantly, essentially, which is what that is. It will create an attachment that is 500x any mention of you visiting his sister or whatever. And so I think this is just a very logical and rational thing when you think about hormones. It's really important, and it really creates the opportunity to see if you're even compatible. And another caveat to this whole conversation, this is, related to people that want to date long term, right? Short term relationships don't really apply to this. This is definitely like about going from dating to bonding. Short term things are very different, and there's less integrity involved just in general from what's out there. And so it's a little bit of a different thing. But hopefully that has been a bit of an intro into those different hormones and how they work, and really understanding, especially for the gentleman, like you're having so much fun with a woman. She's so cool. Everything's going great. You're having amazing dinners. And then suddenly she gets like very different and weird and anxious. And you can sense that she's like suddenly being weird. And then your attraction for her goes a little bit. Well, what's happened is she's bonded to you and you haven't bonded to her yet. Right. And so that's something that I guess can't be helped, right? But the awareness in both sexes kind of working on give an inch, take an inch, give an inch, take an inch, right? Like go at the same rate or as close to the same pace as we can. So yeah, I love this conversation and I have a lot more around this topic that I will get into in my next video. All right, until the next one. If you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.